and she's the student in King Edward Campbell School for Girls, Birmingham, and President Birmingham Young Poet Laureate, recipient of the Elmet Trust Ted Hughes Young Poetry Award, the Foyle Young Poetry Award, and the Tower Poetry Prize. Iona started writing poetry at 8 when her poem It's Our World, an Animal Conversation was selected global runner-up in the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation Poetry Prize in 2014. Besides undertaking commissions, Iona tries to take poetry into the children and young poetry of the city through school visits and workshops, trying to dispel the myth that poetry is elitist and boring. Wow, great. Poetry for all, actually. And I believe, I always say, if the world would be run by poets, it would be much more humanized, much more, far better place than it is now. So, Iona has been featured in the Young Poets Network of the Poetry Society and published following her win in the Prismatic Jane Eyre Poetry Competition, Oxford 2020, the Litmus Writing Prize, and the Contemporary Tales Chaucer Trust Prize, among others, as Youth Ambassador and Literacy Champion West Midlands of the National Literacy Trust. Iona was nominated in May 2023 for the Royal Voluntary Services Coronation Champion Award. Iona pursues grade 8 verse and prose speaking with the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. In 2022, she performed at Shakespeare Globe as a finalist for the Poetry by Heart competition. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me welcoming Iona Keysher. Wonderful. Wonderful. So you think that poetry can be seen as boring, and then you took initiative to make it popular. So are you also aware of the fact that poetry, by some serious poetry lovers, they think if poetry is popular, it is not a good poetry? Are you aware of that? That there is also kind of a stereotype, I should say stereotype, that if the poetry is too popular, if a poem is too popular, this is not perhaps a serious piece of poetry. Are you aware of this?
I actually, a couple of years ago, I want to say 2019, I went to the Birmingham Literature Festival. It was around October time, and I was really excited to go because Simon Maltridge was performing there. He's the current National Poet Laureate, and I really loved his work. And when I was there, he said something quite surprising that didn't necessarily align with my beliefs that much. So he was performing lots of great poetry, and I'm not sure if he was saying this in response to a question or just out of his own will, but he said that if everyone wrote poetry, it wouldn't be fun anymore, because it would be something that everyone was easily able to do, and so there wouldn't really be value in the art if it was so accessible that people could do it, and it wasn't just an exclusive thing to a couple of people who had that interest. And when he said this, I remember I was quite taken aback, because I felt that as a National Poet Laureate, he might be more interested in making poetry accessible, especially, because there is that myth around it being so elitist. So I was surprised, but I also understood his point of view, like as you said. I think that any art form, there is quite a fine line between it being inaccessible and incomprehensible, and it being available to everyone. And I think that there does need to be a level of balance. I agree with him that if everybody wrote poetry, it wouldn't be something special or unique to me, but I think that we do need to make consistent and conscious efforts in bringing poetry more to the masses. So I think it's more nuanced than just saying that, you know, it needs to be more exclusive, because I think it needs to be more inclusive, but not to the point where not to the point where every single person, you know, writes poetry.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I love when it says it needs to have a balance, because this is something that we've been doing for the last 30 years in Paris now. We're trying to develop more communication to make Indian classical music accessible. So with merging classical music with more profound poetry sometimes, or sometimes painting, for example. That's what we did in Royal Albert Hall. Frida Kahlo through Indian classical music. Some are perhaps the lover of painting. The love painting, they come to our event in a hope to explore more about Frida, but they end up being admired with Indian classical music to see. So there are many ways perhaps we can make it accessible, but we should have a balance again, like I said. Art is so profound that and lots of sensitivities there. Let us perhaps listen to one of your poems.
Yeah, sure. Thinking of which one to start.
So one thing that I have to share with you that Professor Ray Noble and Dennis Noble's book is available if you'd like to buy. It's just £10 for today. And then also there is a code. We will have an interview and a bit of talk with Dennis Noble and Ray Noble. I'm planning to do this at the end. So in the meantime, if you'd like to buy this, please have your copy and £10 per each book.
Great. So I think we're going to talk more about this later, but the first poem that I wanted to read is called Quiet Flows the Mahananda, and I think we're going to talk a bit more about how Bengali poetry has influenced me. But the poem I'm going to read now is written from my personal experience from a holiday to India a few years ago, when my grandparents actually took me to the Bangladesh-India border. And so much of my mum's family is from Bangladesh, so it was a really touching experience to be standing at that physical rift between two nations. And I found it especially touching because I'm connected to both of these nations in very different ways. So I think I'll start with this.
Is Iona audible at the end?
Quiet flows the Mahananda. I stand at the border of two time zones, a river separating two nations. Half an hour lost in the gap of time. The river flows quiet as if to console, bathing in its waters an enmeshed culture, a language submerged in tears. Ripples pattern the water between water hyacinths and lotuses bordering the banks. A fish swims past effortlessly, knowing not where it is from, nor where it goes, but that it is present in this moment. On the other side, I hear the muezzin's call for evening prayer. On this side, the smell of incense diffuses to the sound of blowing conch shells. I pause for a while to listen. Children sit on the cold floor of an old temple courtyard, chanting poetry in rhythmic unison. Their teacher supervises. The sentry stands at a distance under a thatched check post. Rifle in hand, he oversees. Tomorrow is Independence Day.
So I have a question. And what inspires you in writing them?
Do you mean just this poem or kind of
overall?
Overall. I think if you were to ask any poet or anyone who's involved in writing this question, they'd probably have a fairly similar anecdote of starting with reading, because I think kind of reading is really the key that unlocks an interest in writing. And so I would have to credit my mum most of all, because from a young age, as you said, I started writing more when I was about 8 years old. But even before then, it was just out of my own will that I would write like small poems that were just more similes than full poems, but kind of comparing the moon to pancakes and stars to raisins, just little things like that that I think children inadvertently do. But I think it was my mum who really instilled a love for books in me from very young. So I grew up in Birmingham, and so my mum would often take me to the local library, and so I would kind of flick through books that I didn't even know how to read yet. And so I was very engaged in reading from very young. And I think it was mainly at school when we would do a lot of creative writing that I began to try my hand at it. And it's quite sad because in primary school, I remember, or even before, they used to really encourage creativity, whether that was through art or writing, but I think that slowly faded away within a school setting, especially in secondary school. But I think writing in school really awoke that interest in me. And I would also, my mum would often suggest, she would tell me to maybe write short stories on things, and it was just quite a liberating exercise for me. And as I kept writing, I remember one of my mum's friends, she suggested that I should enter some of these into competitions because there's such an active literary scene in the UK. And so I did enter the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation poetry competition when I was 8, and I ended up being the global runner-up. So I think that was what really kick-started it for me. It's always nice to have an accolade for a passion. Not that I only write because of competitions or things, but it's nice to kind of almost get something in return. So following that poetry competition, I kind of was quite stimulated to enter more. And as I kept going, I think it really fueled my love for writing. And today I'm here.
Right. So she was born in London, wasn't she? When you used to come to show this event?
She was born in India.
Oh, born in India.
Yeah.
Then,
but she came here when she was less than 2.
And you were based in London?
Yes.
Enfield or somewhere. And then you moved to Birmingham.
Yes.
Great. What a great success story. You went there and then you... let us listen to another poem, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think another thing that quite inspired me along the way was not just my mom, but my dad would often read me short Bengali poems when I was young.
It's not because you just talked about your mom and you learned
no. I just remembered because I think it linked quite well to what I'm going to read. Because I would often read Shahujbat. Yeah, when I was young. And I would often memorize the poems from there, or even nonsensical poetry like yeah, so I think both my parents really instilled that in me, and it's to the point where I kept that love for Bengali poetry even as I grew up. So when I was younger, it was more about, memorizing little nursery rhymes or small poems, or just reading them. But I think as I grew older, since I already love writing English poetry so much, I started to get involved in translation. So the poem I'm going to read now is a translation of the Bengali poem Kolkatar Jishu, which is by Nindranath Chakraborty. And I find it a very beautiful creation because of its simplicity in language and its visual imagery and how it kind of transcends time and place. And as I am bilingual and fluent in English and Bangla, I think translation has always been a great source unsure what to write about. And my translation of this poem was actually chosen as the 16 and under winner of the Stephen Spender Poetry and Translation Prize. So here's Kolkata's Jesus. No red light at the signal, yet the turbulent pace of the city of Kolkata came to an abrupt halt. Adjusting violently, taxis and private cars, three-wheelers, tiger-stamped double-deckers. "He is gone!" they screamed. Those running along from either side of the road, porters, vendors, shopkeepers and customers, like a motionless image on an artist's easel. Each watching in silence, in wobbly feet crossing the road, one side to the other, a naked child. It has rained a while ago in the Jorungi neighborhood. Now the sunlight, like a long spear, descends, piercing the heart of the clouds, enveloping the city of Kolkata in magical light. Resting my chin on the state bus window, I see the sky, I see you. Child of a beggar mother, infant Jesus of Kolkata, stopping the entire traffic in your mystic spell. The public furor, the impatient driver's grinding teeth, you seem perturbed by none. Death looming on either side, juxtaposed in between, you walk along in unstable steps. As if humanity was embodied in the joy of taking the first step, you wanting to conquer the entire universe in your fist. Hence, in wobbly feet you move, from one end of the world to the other.
Thank you, Iona. Just because you are also, I wanted to know more on your writing process as well, but perhaps in another event. But let us, because you are invested in equally, I think, Bengali poetry as well. You are writing in English, but also you are so connected to Bengali literature. You learned and you explored each of your living, studying here. That's absolutely amazing. I would like to say anything in conclusion about your connection with Bengali poetry anymore?
Yeah, so I think I talked a bit about how my journey kind of evolved from, just reading and something more passive to something a lot more active. And so not only Nirendranath Chakraborty, but I also really enjoy Shuni Ganguly's work. One specific poem I also translated by him, Bahar Julai, and also Gilgothar Akini. Those are two poems which are very close to my heart. I think I like Nirendranath Chakraborty for his simplicity, but also Shuni Ganguly for a similar thing, simplicity, but also conveying very profound sentiments in lucid language.
And also a bit of artistic ambiguity as well.
Yes, for sure. And I think it's because of these outlets like the Stephen Spender Poetry and Translation Prize that I've really been able to explore more. So not only Bengali poetry, but I've tried my hand at translating Urdu poetry before because of this online dictionary platform called Rikhta, where you can kind of enter words and they translate it for you. Because I have watched a few, like Bollywood movies before, and Hindi is quite similar to Urdu. I was able to translate in Urdu as well. So it's been a great opportunity living here, where competitions like this exist, in which I'm able to be exposed to not only the poetry of my mother tongue, but other languages too. And I think, as you said, because I grew up in London for about 4 years, even though the majority I was in Birmingham for. I grew up in East London, which has a very strong Bangladeshi diaspora. So one of my most fond memories actually is visiting Brick Lane. I think it's quite, if you go there now, it's quite a gentrified place, but back in 2011-12, it was home to many Bangladeshi shops and restaurants and bookshops too, and I'm sure it still is. But when I was young, I had a friend who was Chinese, and she knew how to read and write her mother tongue. So I think it was kind of out of peer pressure or jealousy that I wanted to learn to read and write Bangla. So I really begged my parents to take me to Brick Lane, and that was where I bought my first Bangla kind of exercise book, or like textbook almost, that would teach me how to read and write the language. And I remember coming home that day and my mum teaching me how to read and write, and I still am able to this day, which I think is a great privilege living in this country, because so many of us don't have the privilege to learn our mother tongues, because, you know, we may be second generation or even later than that. So I think learning Bangla is really kind of the greatest gift that I have, and so I would really like to end on a final poem if possible. This one, it perhaps isn't, you know, it's not a translation of a Bengali poem, but it is what you would call a diaspora poem. And as a British, Indian, Bengali, I often find comfort in diaspora poetry, and although I am kind of critical of the style because it often uses the same like formulaic metaphors and things like that, I do see it as a source of great solace. So this is kind of my take on a diaspora poem, and it was actually chosen as, it meant that I was chosen as a Foyle Young Poet in 2020, and it's inspired by my late great-grandmother, who I was very close to. So this is Homecoming. Draped in sun-dried cotton sari, Ma spreads turmeric paste on my acne scars, the heat and sultriness making it crack in flaxen grains on the cold tiled floor. Twiddling a cotton ball soaked in hibiscus red alta between index finger and thumb, she adorns in curlicues the soles of my feet in neat masterstrokes. Thereafter, a crash course on Bengali customs. Remember the pronoun, do touch her feet. And we get ready for Grandma's home. The hinges to the garden gates screech to welcome us in homecoming. It has been 3 years since last oiled. Ma ushers me to Grandma's room. I expect a family heirloom of some sorts to unfold. Sweet meats or spicy mango pickle in oil left lined in glass jars on the terrace to dry in the midday sun. Or perhaps an old trunk, photographs and books opening floodgates of stories untold. It is dark here. A monastic silence pervades. My pupils adjust the gloom. The street peddler's chant seems distant here, and rickshaw honks certainly not as loud. Grandma looks up, smiles vaguely, conceivably in recognition, tries in futile attempts to edge the stainless steel glass of lemon juice towards me, as if to wash the barriers that bind us. She is paralyzed and bedridden, 13 years now. I sip the juice, hold her cellophane hand in mine, nails charred, fingers wrinkled from centenarian grime. Old memories line her parched skin, carrying tales from the crevices. Queen Victoria, Dhaka, riots, the partition. Do steamboats ply on the Burigonga River? She suddenly asks. I listen. The sourness from lemon ferments in my mouth. I am not sure what to say. So much has elapsed. Feeble voice now raised in command, she looks to the metal grille window. Kill those soldiers, they looted us. I gently shove the red ants aside. She comes. I watch her eyes roll back like in a trance. At times I feel Grandma records everything, family stock keeping, her responsibility. Spools of uncoiled tapes binding her tighter to bed, her stale recording studio. And now we replace chocolates with chewable vitamin orbs, Staffordshire pottery for a feather-light bedpan, more donations than gifts for a happy housemaid and masseur. Our suitcases grow lighter with every year that slips by, bags unzip to the stench of expiry, yet bringing much more to all than we leave back home.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure talking to you, Iona. You are a wonderful performance poet as well. Very powerful poet, but a very good performer as well.
Thank you for inviting me today. It's great to be in such an historic place.
Thank you.